She, at that time, was just getting involved with occultation observations and setting up an all-digital astrovideo video system at the University of Maryland. And we are now, she's ready to present a follow-up on her experience with that system there. And so take it away, Elizabeth. We're ready for you to start.
Okay, so we had go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So in 2013, we acquired funds to purchase an occultation system, and a little bit of background history there, but you can go ahead and go to the next. And we ended up purchasing and going for the ADVS system, Astronomical Digital Video System, which consists of a point gray grasshopper express, cable hardware timer and camera controller, and a MacBook Pro. And this is all detailed in paper by Dave Salt et al. Next slide, please. So when I presented last year, this was pretty much the status of where we were. We had the equipment, and we've installed software, but we were having issues with getting everything to play nicely together, and we were kind of at an impasse and weren't getting anywhere fast. That's where we were last summer. Next slide, please. So in the fall, we were so far behind on getting stuff done. We managed to engage a student, a junior, who was familiar with Linux and Mac and was able to get the laptop running with the software to play nice together, so that by the end of the fall we were doing active tests with the camera and doing recording just out at the observatory. At the same time, we were training some college sophomores how to run one of our telescopes and teaching them how to use the camera so that they could actually do some observation. We also were trying to use the camera on a short tube 80. I was hoping that this might be a nice portable setup, but at least on the tripod that I was using, the fact that there was no tracking made it a little bit more difficult than I had anticipated. However, once we attached it to one of our refractors at the observatory, next slide, please. We managed to get our first observation during a very nice, cold night of 489 Comacina, also some named Star, and this happened during winter break. So the students were actually gone. Of course, occultations happen despite the student schedule, but we managed to observe it. Next slide. So this is just sort of showing the finder chart that we ended up using. Next slide. And this is our recording, the output from Tangra. Showing a nice little occultation there. And this was sort of very first solid attempt for us, and we were quite happy and excited. Next slide. And so the students were very excited to hear about it, and kind of gave them some goals for the spring when they came back, seeing how the data was incorporated into the overall result. Next. Now, we did run into some issues during the spring, namely that it was very cold, and when the students actually tried on a couple of the nights, they ended up, well, we're not sure how it happened, but basically one of the cables broke. After diagnosing the problem, we replaced the cable, which is simple enough to do. One of the other things that we've been having issues with was changing frame rates, which we noticed back in the fall when we were doing initial tests. But after doing some follow-up with Michael Berry and Dave Galt, we managed to get the updates to the system and editing some minor things like the Univ file and camera firmware. However, we're very hesitant to update because we're running Linux, and I'm not familiar enough with Linux to be able to do Linux updates because of all the dependencies that entails. So we're pretty much not allowing the system to do auto updates because we don't want to mess up how it's working with the other software. Next slide, please. But after getting it fixed, we were able to do a number of observation attempts. Had some issues with the buildings and trees getting in the way. But then we did have some successful observations or successful misses. And one of our more recent observations was in early August with Mike Henston. Next. So this was Mike 46441, Mike Henston. And it was in the, not too late at night, almost midnight, but I was on vacation. So during the summer, I've been training 2 volunteers to run the equipment, and actually only the last few weeks right beforehand managed to get them confidently trained so they could do the observation. This is showing the finder chart from Starry Night Pro, showing the larger box is the CCD field of view through a 6-inch refractor, and the smaller box is the ADVS field of view. Next slide. And this is just a raw image from the CCD camera. The target star is actually sort of the bright one towards the center. This, of course, is a good 30-second exposure, so we didn't do any, we're not worried about getting pretty pictures with the CCD camera, just enough to identify the field of view and confirm that we're in the right area. We just collect a couple of raw shots. Okay, so here are the results from the Mike Henston observation. The students were on target, on time, and they managed to observe a very fast 2-frame occultation, about a half second. Our initial processing was difficult because of the very, very faint comparison stars. Although the target star was easy to see, there were very few comparison stars. All of them were much fainter. Tony George did additional analysis for us, confirming the 2-frame occultation, and these graphs are from him. So huge thanks to him. Next. So we do have a couple of upcoming events that we'll be trying for. There's one, 319 Leona, where at the observatory we're in the 1 sigma zone, but if I were to observe from my home in Alexandria, I would be in the shadow path. The problem is that the target star is faint, and I don't think I'd be able to do it with any portable equipment. I'll probably be left with observing from the observatory in any case. There's a couple other for 1 sigma passes coming up, and then 129 Antigone in early November that we'll be trying for as well. Next. Now, some of the procedure or prep that we do to get ready for all these occultations is that we use a cult watcher to find a potential occultation. I've got a number of sites sort of pre-programmed in case I'm on travel, maybe observe from my stepdaughter's house in Colorado Springs, or, kind of wishful thinking, but I do have other sites programmed in. Next slide. So this one's for 319 Leona. So I've got Mark observing it, potentially observing it from my home in Alexandria, and then where the observatory locations that as well, just outside of the shadow path. It is a magnitude 13.4 star, which is at the limit with the 6th century factor that I've got. Next. So again, here we have our chart from Starry Night Pro showing the CCD and ADVS field of view. This looks like a very rich star field, but it's predominantly faint stars. I believe I'm hopeful that the target star is the one that's marked at the center there, and as mentioned, it is a 13.4 magnitude star. Fortunately, the comparison stars are slightly, or potential comparison stars are slightly brighter. But next slide. I seem to have lost one. Okay. So by shifting the frame just slightly so that the target star is not quite at center, I can bring in a few additional potential comparison stars. So that's one of the things with the students who did the observation during the summer. They didn't have enough experience to understand that they could shift the field of view a little bit in order to bring in additional field stars. Next slide. Of course, the most important thing is kind of synchronizing our telescope in the first place, and so there's a nice wide field to sort of show roughly where in the sky. Next slide. So these are sort of the procedures the night of an observation, doing fairly straightforward stuff. We do use the ADVS camera, the little microwave camera, in the eyepiece holder, so that one of the biggest issues is remembering to flip between the CCD field of view to the ADVS field of view. We're flipping from the camera, primary camera to the eyepiece holder. That actually messed me up on an occultation earlier this week because it was just too early in the morning and I forgot. Next slide. So of course, afterwards, submitting our reports, the cloudy report, if missed report, filling out that detailed report if we do see something. Next. And everyone should be familiar with this. Next slide, please. The summary of sort of our beta testing so far since we purchased the ADVS as a beta test site. We're generally very pleased with the system as it is very easy to use. I've been training students to use it, and so we've had teams going out and using it, and they're able to put it together, get a recording, get some observations. It's pretty sensitive. We were able to, get that 2-frame occultation. Just a couple minor things. There is one connection that is a little bit loose. It's not a very tight connection and makes it very possible to lose the connection between the timing unit and the laptop. In addition, some of the cables, as any cables, are generally fragile, and during the winter they get very cold and brittle and are susceptible to breakage. When we replace the cable, we try to get a sturdier, more weather-friendly cable that would be good for outside. Finally, sort of a software thing with the GPS. It takes a little while for the software and GPS to kind of start talking to each other, and sometimes we have to restart the program. But in general, we're pretty happy with it, and it would just be neat if they could get it to work with some of the other video cameras that are currently on the market now. But in general, I would recommend the system. Next one. And that is it. Questions?
Questions? No questions coming from the audience at the meeting.
Ted had a question on the Mike Penston video. What was the frame rate?
Yeah, we have a question. What was the frame rate on the Mike Penston video where there was an occultation?
They were using 3.75 frames per second.
Ah, so you had the 2 frames, but they were each about a third of a second. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Thank you for giving us this presentation, Elizabeth, and I appreciate the follow-up. It sounds like we have a useful set of equipment there that some occultationists are going to be using. Thank you very much for your presentation.
No problem. Looks like there are some online questions.
Any online questions? Or?
Can you say a bit more about how you like the ADVS features?
Okay, and you're one of the online participants is asking, could you say a little more about how you like the ADVS features? Elizabeth, are you still with us?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, so it's fairly straightforward to use. Connecting, it connects, you have the camera, it connects first. It's very easy to use. So it's got gamma and gain, and you can adjust the frame rate. It is sort of beta testing, and we managed to debug one issue with frame rate not changing initially, but we are able to change. This most recent attempt early on Monday morning this past week, after I failed to switch the flip mirror, I went ahead and sort of stayed on target and practiced with different frame rates and gammas and gains to adjust it so it could be visible on a 13.2 magnitude star. And it's fairly straightforward. I'm not sure what other features. It's very simple, so there's not a lot of features. I'm not sure what they're asking.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised that you can see a 13.4 magnitude star with the system. I guess you do by integration.
You're going to end up going to a little bit longer exposure or fewer frames per second. This does run from 30, go up to 30 frames per second, and then down to multiple seconds per frame.
I see.
So it's just how bright. But we've generally been trying to keep it on magnitude 12 or brighter stars.
Okay. Any other questions for Elizabeth Warner?
Yes, there's one over there that she tried to use
A questioner asks, have you tried to use pre-pointing with your system?
No, we have not, because we can have the main CCD camera. We can synchronize on a bright star fairly accurately, and then use the RA and DEC to center on the target star, and take a quick image, confirm we're on the right field, kind of have an idea of how faint some of the stars are in the frame, so that we can actually compare what we're seeing in the CCD to what we're seeing in the ADVS. And we can do a quick matchup with that, and then adjust or do a live adjustment of the pointing so that we can get into this frame, as well as have a couple of potential comparison stars in the frame as well.
There's a question here, why do you use a different camera to frame the event?
Well, the CCD camera has a much larger field of view, and it's easier to match to our star charts that we generate beforehand, and then that way we know we're on target. And when we flip to the smaller field of view and with the higher frame rate, so we don't see as many stars, we're a little bit more confident of being on target.
What's the aperture they're using? What is the aperture telescope?
What is the aperture of the telescope in the observatory?
Currently, the one we've been using predominantly is a 6-inch refractor, 152 millimeter f9.
Uh-huh. Okay. I guess that's all the questions. Thank you very much.